How never to die in Siege. Hey, what's up guys, Irish Tail here, and in today's video, I'm going to try and teach you guys how never to die in Siege.
Yeah, like that's ever gonna happen. What a load.
Okay, yeah, so in fairness, that probably isn't ever going to happen. You're playing a competitive shooter, you're bound to die quite regularly. But clickbait title and thumbnail aside, the aim of today's video is to try and help some of you guys, or maybe your friends if you want to share this video with them, realise that death is in fact not the end of a round in Siege. And although you may be dead, you can still have a lot more to offer to your team from more of a support standpoint. Now, the main reason that I'm making this video and want to make it so that more and more people would click on it is because recently I've noticed a whole hell of a lot that in solo queue ranked, players that die essentially decide they're going to roleplay actually being dead. And by that, what I mean is when they die, they go completely mute, they don't say a word. That's it until the next round, they won't say a word, other than maybe abusing you if you happen to lose the round at the end. And obviously, you know, this isn't great, as you potentially lose a great wealth of information, or potentially an extra set of eyes that you could really use and benefit on. And, you know, it only really hinders your team as a whole in general. So, for example, in the gameplay in the background, that I happen to be using, I'll be completely honest with you guys, I played terribly during this ranked game. I played it with a few friends who I play with and stream with on a regular basis, and I'll be honest, I played completely terribly. I think I got one kill the entire game, and pretty much I felt like an absolute dead weight towards helping the team during any point in the game. But the guys did point out to me that, in fact, even though I was dead quite regularly, I was exceptionally helpful to them, because although I wasn't offering up much in the way of like utility or extra firepower or in frags, during this game I basically became the Overwatch person for these guys. I picked up the support role that I was basically forced into due to being dead, and I made sure that when I was dead, I was watching the game from cameras, watching it from players' perspective, making calls to aid my team, just giving them information about where enemy players were, when and where potential pushes were coming from, or where to watch for potential peaks or, you know, jump-ins. And just generally speaking, I played this pretty much the entire game because I was forced into this role. And instead of being quiet, I kept up with the information. And even on attack, when I was killed, I made sure to keep relaying information to the team. I watched people's drones whenever they asked me to. I also acted as a second pair of eyes for the guys when they were doing things like quick peeking corners, glancing into rooms, or just generally surveying an overall large area. I would say, hey, there's a guy to your left that maybe you didn't see, and they go, oh yeah, just there, and then get the kill. And just generally speaking, I acted, as I said, as Overwatch for the guys, providing extra information that they may have missed. And in general, I still served a purpose to the team, even though I wasn't getting these kills, and I was still able to help in getting the overall win to the game. Granted, it wasn't through the kills, but it was through the support that I gave. And now the reason I want to cover this is because, as I said, players don't seem to do this often enough. People just do not like to speak and continue giving information when they die. So, for example, here on defense, I picked Echo, and I have these two great drones that I can place wherever I see fit, to try and get information and also prevent plants. Now, of course, my initial plan was to stay alive, give this information, and reduce the attacker's ability to make plants with, obviously, his disruption. Obviously, this didn't really go as planned, as I died fairly quickly into the round. But after this, I didn't just stop talking to my team. I then used these drones and the other cameras to make calls and say, oh, there's an enemy there. Oh, there's a push there. And in the clip you can see, it was like there was an enemy here, and I was calling, oh, enemy on the north samurai window, or oh, there's a sledge on the north desk window. And I was able to make these calls without putting myself at risk because I was already dead. I wasn't just randomly sat there on the map on my camera looking somewhere and getting shot at. I was already dead, so there was no sort of way for me to be at any kind of risk, which allowed my team to freely move about without having to check cameras themselves as often as I was doing that for them, and I was able to give them calls and pass on the information to them and keep helping them out, freeing up their ability to move around. And this is a bit of information that I wanted to pass on to you guys. I'm sure plenty of you do this all the time. But this is for those of you who maybe just have recently picked up the game or who don't really think about giving information once you've died. Because I know there are a lot of you out there. I know these people exist. You can't deny it. I have seen them pretty much every ranked game that I play solo queue. There is always somebody who dies early and basically just switches off for the round, maybe sits on their phone, goes and reads Reddit, goes on Twitch, whatever it is they want to do in their free time, and they just suddenly stop helping you, and then they'll come back into the next round, and they'll just be abusive to you and say, oh, we lost the round, and you're like, well, you know, if you'd been on cameras or watching drones or helping us, maybe we wouldn't have lost the round, but you don't obviously get the chance to see that because, again, they've wandered off. Now, of course, I do always want to point about the good and the bad that comes with this, and I do have to make a word of warning for those of you guys that maybe start making calls and start getting into this a little bit. There is a fine line between being a useful asset to the team and aiding them with good calls, and just being a nuisance that just keeps spouting things without giving your team the ability to act on these calls or giving valuable information. So a good example of this is if you start speaking, you say, oh, there's an enemy sledge to your left, then you keep speaking. The teammate who you've called that to, one, can't listen out for the sledge themselves to confirm they're there, and two, it distracts them when you're speaking to them. It takes a bit of concentration to have to think, oh, I'm listening to something and I'm looking at something. You're doing two things at once. Your brain isn't really designed to multitask as well as it is to focus on one thing. So obviously, once you've made the call, shut up. Unless you have to give an update, just stay quiet. That's all you need to say. There's a sledge there. And your team knows that and it'll help them. And again, it's just one of those things I've seen where people just don't know when to shut up. They make the call and that's it. They just suddenly don't stop speaking. And it just ends up getting you just killed, or it ends up like affecting you badly. And then what you do as a result is you mute that player. And you're back into that situation of just basically being better off saying nothing because you've been muted for being useless. So you may as well have said nothing in the first place. So it's important to temper like how often you call versus how often you stay quiet. There is a fine line. It is hard to sort of get the balance, but once you get there, you'll be doing it all the time, and it's really also to pick up. I do also recommend that when you're making calls, make sure the information that you're giving to your team is correct and accurate. Again, the amount of times I've played games where people have said, oh, there's a sledge to your left, you look left, and then suddenly you're shot from the right by that sledge, and you're kind of like, but you just gave me a call. You took the time to tell me he was on the left, and he wasn't. Why did you give me that call? And the person goes, oh, it was a hunch. Oh, I thought he was there. And again, it's just this thing of, if you don't know, don't make the call, because again, you're better off just being quiet and saying nothing at the end of the day, because you're still going to affect your team that way. And again, this will end up getting you muted if you start giving bad calls regularly. If teammates feel they can't trust you, they won't bother trying to. And again, it needs to be this careful line of, do I give information? Yes, okay, no. So again, if you're not sure, maybe say, I think there's a sledge on the left, though he might not be there. Or, I saw a sledge there like 10 seconds ago, he could have moved. Again, at least you're covering your back, you're giving a bit of information, but you are also being clear that it may not be relevant information at this moment in time. If there is an enemy right in front of you and you can see him and you know he's there, then make the call and say, there is a player right here. And then your teammates know. If you have to follow it up with a ping, feel free to do so. But again, there is that fine line of don't abuse pings too much, because a good camera and good calls is worth so much better than getting a direct ping on a player and then losing that camera. So again, it's one of these fine lines here and there, and don't feel like that's something you can do. Don't feel like, oh, I'm not going to speak to my team, I'm just going to ping, because again, that camera could be in such a good location and you could just be losing it instantly by making this ping that isn't needed instead of making the call. And again, it's just one of those things, it'll take time to work at, you'll get used to it, and you'll just learn to sort of get on the microphone, because again, if you want to get to the higher ranks in Siege, you need to start using your microphone, and you need to make sure that your calls are as good when you're alive and when you're dead. But back to the main meat and bones of the video. As I said, death is not the end. When you die, start checking those cameras, start looking at your teammates' views, seeing what they see. Speak to them. Hell, even if you don't have a microphone, just type the generic locations to give your team some sort of semblance of information. I did say that microphones are the best way to give information, but if you don't have one, if you see an enemy, say, in drum or on the south side of a map, just say, oh, I've just seen Blackbeard's south side, or oh, I've just seen sledge in drum. You know, something quick that you can type. Obviously, if you're typing, it's going to be a bit slower. They may have moved, but again, it's just this semblance of information. Don't try and give exactly accurate calls, because with typing, they'll have moved by the time you've finished, but try and just give generic calls, because again, it's better than nothing, and you are only going to be aiding your team as long as the calls are correct. And again, you have to remember that information is pretty much 60 to 70% of what you need in Siege, and it's only about 40 to 30% pure fragging skill. And realistically, without information, the other team can absolutely outplay you and beat you, even if they aren't as good at getting accurate shots, because they have this information that they can capitalize on. And there's no reason not to try and help your team out as much as possible, as long as you get between that balance of talking too much and not talking. It's like I say, it's a fine line. It's very hard to get that balance, but it is something worth trying to do, because again, it's only a benefit to your team. But those are just my thoughts and opinions on the importance of continuing to communicate after you die in Siege. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think the dead should just play dead and be silent? Or do you think, like me, they should, as I say, keep talking and provide information? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, or feel free to share your own stories similar to this game where I did absolutely terrible. You know, let me know in the comments below. Also, if you enjoyed the video, why not consider liking and subscribing? And also, for anyone who may be interested, I stream 2 to 3 days a week over on Twitch, which you can find through the link in the description below, where you can see games like this actually played out live. A lot of the footage I use is taken straight from Twitch streams that I do. So again, if you want to see the full games without me talking over them like this, feel free to check out the Twitch link. Similarly, there are links also if you want to check out my my Twitter and my Redbubble store. Feel free to check those out if you want to. But other than that, guys, thanks for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.